to see you, Bing.
Welcome to Career Pivots, where we've got a very special guest tonight, Bing Gordon. Bing and I were in the class of 72, and he overlapped with one of our co-producers, Randy, who was, hope I get it right tonight, Randy, 71. Before beginning, we want to make sure everyone knows we do record these, so people have the benefit of it later. Jeff, I think you've got a couple of notes before we get started.
Yeah, just a couple quick notes. Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Bing, for coming. It's going to be just a great show. We call them shows for a reason. The flow is real nice. People can interact as we go, and we're going to have a nice time together. There's always a good crowd tonight, so the must-see Yale is really taking off week to week. We're getting a lot of repeat folks. We're getting new folks. Just keep coming. Preview in the next few weeks, just so you've heard it. Next week we've got a life and personal growth show in the leadership forum, and Steve Bloom will be talking, I think, there as well. And then the week after, there's actually a student session, but some alumni are welcome. So on the 18th of March, you can chime in, but it's going to be a student night. And then back to a STEM report on March 25th. And we've got a really good show that night as well. So encourage you all to keep coming as you are. As you know, this is sponsored by the YAA. And we're trying to do our best to make things relevant for the alumni base. And last, just remember, there's Cross Campus, which is our version of LinkedIn, but it's better than LinkedIn. Not quite LinkedIn, it's more than LinkedIn. But encourage all of you to go to I think it's crosscampus.org, if I'm correct. Chelsea will put the link up, and come join. There's just thousands and thousands of us connecting all the time. So we're all here to make connections, help, and give help. So with that, I'll give it back to you, Sam, and everybody enjoy the night.
I had a chance to catch up with Bing a couple of days ago, and I'm going to give a brief introduction, and then we're going to try to cover some important points we think he could address for our audience and take questions. So as I said, Bing graduated in 72, when at Yale, he once starred with Sigourney Weaver in a production of Waiting for Godot. He earned his MBA at Stanford, where he was introduced by a professor to a fellow named Trip Hawkins. And Bing had an extraordinary run as a longtime executive at Electronic Arts, which I'll refer to as EA, beginning with its founding in '82. Among other things, he headed EA's marketing and product development, drove its branding strategy, developed some very fascinating pricing strategy for its packaged goods and online games, very instrumental in creating its studio organization, bringing storytelling to the game market, contributed to the design and marketing of many of EA's major franchises, including, I think, John Madden Football, The Sims, SimCity, Need for Speed, Tiger Woods Golf, and Command and Conquer. And he was the chief creative officer from 98 to 2008. So Bing, maybe a good place to begin is how'd you move from Stanford to EA?
Let's see. Hope my audio is coming in. When the summer before I started at Yale, I worked at Disneyland, and I got as an employee to go into Disneyland before hours and after hours, and I wanted those audio animatronics to come to life. Soon after, a movie came out called Westworld with Yul Brynner, which later got made into a scary TV show, but it basically was, what if the audio animatronics came to life? And so I had this notion. Then at Yale, I acted some, and I wanted to explore off stage, and I wanted to do save and restore and replay. And so I had this notion of an adult Disneyland. And in the mid '70s, when the first computer kits were announced, I thought this could be it. So how I got into the games business was basically as an actor who loved the parts and didn't like the emotional connection with other actors. And I wanted to have Disneyland be endless without boundaries. And so that's what drove me toward gaming, as this notion back in the '70s that interactive virtual worlds were going to be an everyday occurrence sooner or later. And then the question is how I got to Stanford Business School. So there's a lot of people here old enough to know that what kids don't know, that there's a lot of random walk aspects to how we turn out. Well, I was earning a living as a commercial fisherman. I'm in San Francisco, and I hear somebody yell, "Hey, Gordon!" And it's a Yale hockey player named Andy Larkowicz from Rhode Island, who I hadn't seen for a couple of years. And we hung around with him and his wife, got drunk. At the end of the day, he said, "I know you always thought I was kind of a jerk." He was a dirty defenseman. He said, "But your two best friends are nearby." I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And he said, "They're at Stanford." I said, "What are they doing?" He said, "They're going to business school." I went, "Oh, they sold out." So I went to visit them with Goodspeed and Carl Frank. We played on the JV hockey team for 3 years together. And they invited me to go with them to Stanford. So now I've got this notion of the virtual Disneyland, and a sense that I need to make a living with my brain and not with my hands. And at one point, you know, any of you have heard a great teacher, I had a great decision science teacher called named Peter G.W. Keene. And he asked, if money were no object, what would you do? I told everyone my virtual Disneyland story. The room went silent. And afterwards he said, "Sorry if you were embarrassed." I go, "What?" You know, that's kind of my vision. That's not embarrassing. He said, "There's a guy in another class who said something like that, and his name is Trip Hawkins." And so that's kind of this from commercial fishing to Andy Larkowicz to Wick Goodspeed to Peter G.W. Keene to Trip Hawkins.
And then you, I guess, soon after found yourself in a room throwing up all kinds of things around the room, doing your business plan. Is that right?
Yeah, you know, there's a couple of you are in venture, but there's a concept called entrepreneur in residence. And VCs love nothing better than getting proprietary deal flow that they don't have to pay for. So in this case, Trip was the 50th employee at Apple in the first MBA, and I was working for an ad agency at the time. And the founder of Sequoia Capital, named Don Valentine, who was a semiconductor guy, said, I'll give you an office in my office for a month. Bring your people in and see if you can put together a plan, because you're late. There are already like 130 computer game companies in the US. And so 5 of us sat for a week, literally with, you know, white butcher block paper, kind of 2.5 feet by 3.5 feet, with a topic on, you know, customer vision and the strategy. And I was responsible for the strategy of let's try to brand media, which at the time we realized most mass market media was no longer branded. It was branded by creator and not by publisher. So we wrote the business plan there, and then we got kicked out and got a, you know, crappy little office with cables running between offices to connect everybody's computer on an Apple Talk network. And we wrote a plan, and from Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins, we raised $2 million on $3 million pre-money.
Wow, not bad, not bad. And I guess the rest is history. What would you say a couple of the real highlights of your time at EA?
Well, let's see. So when we wrote the plan, we cited an American educator named John Dewey, whose kind of approach to learning was learning by doing. And we thought, you know, software can be learning by doing without destruction of assets. So, you know, and we aimed for games for 30-year-olds instead of 13-year-olds. We called it software worthy of minds that use it. So one highlight was just watching that start to work. And, you know, we did the first user-generated content games in 1983, you know, which now with things like Roblox and Minecraft are overnight successes. but at the time it was way out there. Another thing, we wrote the plan, and y'all remember how sophomoric we all once were. I wrote the plan, and someday games are going to be bigger than movies or music, and someday there's going to be million units selling computer games. And at the time, in 1982, there had only been a couple music albums that sold more than 1 million. The first was the Bee Gees from Saturday Night Fever, and with the movie tie-in. And we wrote that. I didn't know what 1 million felt like, and so a few years later, after we'd launched this brand called EA Sports that I named, I'm in New York. I'm carrying a little EA Sports logo briefcase, and I'm calling a cab. And all of you who are New York experts, there's a skill to get in a cab, and it's not, if you're an out of towner and you wave your hand, they only look at you they only stop if you're a dupe. And so I'm going to get in. I'm thankful. There's a cabbie, and he looks at me. He goes, "EA Sports, it's in the game." And I thought that's what 1 million feels like. That's what a mass market is. So that was kind of this tipping point when we knew we'd arrived. Then a bunch of other stuff along the way, and the going from vision to successful game, kind of to successful anything, kind of as always wildly interesting. Our first #1 game ever was Chuck Yeager's Flight Trainer. And, that kind of validation when the audience votes with their wallet or with their feet is always kind of a highlight.
And then
that cabbie in New York, that was an Instagram moment, 20 years before Instagram.
And then you got to an interesting internal forecast for The Sims, as I recall.
Oh, yeah. So as a father of daughters, I was at Yale when Yale got coeducated, and so there's plenty of experience with just how rocky that is, rocky that was. I was also in the computer software, the game business, when it went from all boys and all whatever side of the brain that analytic thing is. And over about 2 years, we added 250 graphic designers to the firm because of CD-ROM, and that was an equally hard cultural clash that I was responsible for solving. And what I did, it brought in somebody to be the Jimmy Hoffa for the graphic designers, make sure they got half the vote. But as a father of daughters, I was really concerned. There's a book, I think, called Losing Ophelia, about Ophelia from Hamlet kind of going crazy and losing herself. So I was really worried about daughters in 5th and 6th grade of trying to please boys and losing touch with their true selves. And so I thought if they could only be confident about math and science and confident in competition, that would be an inoculation or vaccination against bad boys. And so they got into electronic arts as visitors a lot. Our older daughter, Chloe, both daughters ended up going to Yale too, by the way. The older daughter, Chloe, she actually was the first guinea pig for a lineup of education software we did. And, so when the Sims was beta, I was a big believer that the virtual worlding was going to work. And within EA, there was a sense of, no, people games don't work. Dollhouses don't have computers, and girls won't buy a game. And at the time, the only game that was primarily female had been Ms. Pac-Man. And, I think you're all wrong. I think the tide's about to turn. And so the game launched, I think, in January. And I was the one, I took it to the trade show in June. Everybody felt sorry for me. And EA, which had a really good sales force, had forecast the lifetime sales of The Sims in October, 3 months before launch, when the game was already beta, at 200,000 units with zero marketing budget.
And this was 99, was that?
Yeah, it would have been. I think we shipped in January 99. So 3 months before. And so I basically, and probably everybody here has done this sometime. You throw yourself down in the railroad tracks and say the train is either gonna chop me in three, or you're gonna stop and give me a shot here. And I kind of shamed the company. And oh, hi, Mike Schaefer. Yeah, I thought that was the Mike Schaefer that I knew. The so I'm sitting there thinking, I think everybody else is wrong. I think I'm right. I think everybody else is wrong. And over to that Christmas, my daughters, who were, there would have been 10 and 8, with another girlfriend, they're sitting in one chair in this office where I'm sitting now, and they're playing the Sims beta, and nobody had access to it. And they didn't leave their seat for about, I don't know, 6 hours. And then at one point I hear a blood-curdling scream, and one daughter is yelling, "Daddy, Daddy, Zelda killed my mommy." And it's one way or another, there was jealousy, and one of the friends wanted to get a partner for her sim. And now I knew that they were having a level of emotion that rarely had happened in games at the time.
And so it launched, and instead of 200,000, what did it sell?
I think it's a couple hundred million.
Yeah, a little bit different.
Hey, Stuart Halpern asked, how do we differentiate EA? So it was a couple things. The strategy early on was an older customer, more thought provoking. We launched with the marketing of trying to become a movement. And we even, on every package, it said, "Join us, we see farther," and said software as an art form. And we packaged the games in mini albums, because A&M Records was an investor, and they taught us how albums were made. So we marketed as higher aspiration. And then we, all the other game companies at the time were created by developers and putting stuff in baggies. So we kind of professionalized. So we committed to being good at distribution. And in fact, we overinvested in distribution control, which was pretty hard to do. Our competitors at the time, it was basically, the programmer was the president of the company. He burned discs or cassettes and put them in plastic bags. And then we also committed to technology. Our founding CTO was from Xerox PARC. And so we actually built a thing called the Artist Workstation for developers that gave tools and even eventually a hardware emulator to improve performance and get rid of kind of the null aspects of processor performance. So it was technology, I'd say mission-based brand marketing and controlled distribution. So as much as anything else, we always just thought bigger. And one thing about that is every one of the competitors, the founder owned like 80% of the company. And this got set up where the CEO owned like 12% of the company. So there was this economic value that every time the company got 10x bigger, there was a whole nother peer of leaders who kind of got in the money. So it was, nobody ever talks about that, but I like to think about companies that go through passages of creating a new group of founders, and you want to try to imbue the moral authority in that new group of founders, but also a sense of meaningful rewards. For the first 15 years at EA, I tried to run it so anybody in EA who became what I'd call an element, they were somebody who could dramatically increase the likelihood of profitability in a game, that in their next 4 years of stock vesting, they'd make enough to have after-tax cash for a down payment wherever they lived. And because I kind of always thought that in the 30s, the number one financial goal is get into home ownership, because once you're in home ownership, the out of pocket's the same as renting, and hopefully do that before you have to have kids. Jefferson Stewart asked about Mule. So interesting enough, with Mule was the highest rated game I ever saw that didn't sell, and it was a 4-player game designed for an early Atari computer, and there weren't other. None of the other personal computers in the 80s allowed for 4 inputs at once. And it had this really cool thing nobody's ever copied, which is live action auction. It's kind of like what you see with GameStop, but all 4 of the characters move it up and down on ladders. And when two characters hit the same rung, the trade was executed. And the leader of the group was from Arkansas, and I even named their group for him as Ozark Softscape. He was the first transgender person in the game business. Went from being kind of a 6'4" brainiac from Arkansas and transitioned to being a woman like 5 years later. And the no sequel, I don't think they ever sequel. There's some of the creative people in the business that never did any of their own sequels. Will Wright, who did SimCity and The Sims, would never touch any of his own sequels. Sid Meier would try to never do any of his own sequels, and Mule just wasn't profitable enough. It was called, the Mule is short for like multi-unit kind of lunar module or something like that. It was basically a robot that looked like a mule, and the game played a little like, I don't know, maybe like Monopoly, and you'd mine ore called Christite and something else. It was wonderful, but partly because it was a 4-player game.
So in 2008, we're going to hop ahead here. You joined Kleiner Perkins, where you're now the chief product officer and lead their S Fund, which I always think of everything social and mobile, but I know it's the investment initiative to fund and build applications and services that deliver on the promise of the social web. I know you launched that in 2010, 2 years after you got there, with strategic partners including Amazon, Facebook, and Comcast. Bing's been on a huge number of boards, including Amazon for many years, Zynga, among others. You've been on the VC side of countless pitches and made many investments. I think currently they include Airtime, Audius, Azurus, BetterWorks, Duolingo, Knack, Magic Leap, Mobcrush, Truecaller, and Zazzle. Of course, prior investments included Amazon, Audible, EA, Spotify, Twitter, and Zynga, some pretty well-known names there. So Bing, one thing that might be very useful for our audience is for you to talk a little bit about the relationship between a VC and a founder. How to be a good VC, how to be a good founder, and the role maybe of, OKRs. You want to?
Well, that, I'd say the judge of a VC is returns, not popularity. And, so unfortunately, and maybe this is the case with everybody in money, but there's plenty of VCs who are successful who fabricate more than they should. They promise, don't deliver. My bugaboo is VCs who cause harm, and because there's a lot of times when the interests of the VC and the interests of the founder are not aligned. One of the questions you'd asked before, Sam, is what were the surprises in venture? And my surprise in going to Kleiner, there was a couple. The first is you got to think bigger and longer term. It just didn't occur to me beforehand that the average engagement's about 7 years, which is the average engagement in a marriage in the U.S. And so you enter. You don't want to enter a 7-year thing, and you certainly don't want to have kids together if you don't think there's a big potential outcome. So it's more money and longer term. So you need to believe it's a bigger idea. Then with Another dirty secret is that I kind of discovered later that until the company reaches product market fit, you can't fire the CEO. And a lot of grown-up boards think, yeah, our whole job is just to pay, retain, hire and fire the CEO. Well, in Series A, Series B companies, if you nuke the CEO, you kind of have to come up with a whole new round of funding. You got to find somebody new, and it's very hard to regain the moral authority. And about the only exception is if the CEO picks a right-hand person to come in and grooms them. But usually that doesn't happen until after product market fit. And so, therefore, since you can't nuke the CEO, the number one job of the board should be to improve the skills of the CEO to help them scale. And so often success breeds failure. The reason is, especially the high intellectual capacity kids in their 20s, they can improve their cognitive skill faster than their leadership skill. And at scale, complexity is kind of the destroyer. And so the founders we work with almost all are micromanagers, especially the founders under age 35. And they're really effective micromanagers. And micromanaging stops being a useful skill for the founder somewhere between 50 and 150 employees. So the board's number one job ought to be to help the CEO see the future. Just did a meeting with one early stage company with Daniel Ek of Spotify, and asked Daniel, I've known since he was a kind of $70 million company, what's your biggest learning? And he said, my biggest learning is if you're going to succeed, you're going to outgrow your execs. And he said, until my company value is 25 billion, it never occurred to me that a GC, general counsel, head lawyer, might be worth $10 million a year. But when I got one and I was at that scale, I went, holy crap, it's just an order of magnitude different than you think. And there are just so few humans that can grow their personal skills at the pace some of these companies grow. That you almost need to be prepared to rip and replace. And then, so back to the question of the VC and the founders. So the best board members, John Doerr's example of this, they're quiet for a long time. They don't hog the mic. And when they do, they ask a really good question. Maybe they share benchmark data, but thought-provoking questions. But the best investors, just it's a combination of seeing, picking, winning, and then exiting. And different VCs are better at different things. Should I start looking at some of these questions?
Sure. Yeah.
I see one from Winston about established versus an up and comer. How do you choose? Some of it is how much cash you have. My experience with entrepreneurs is there's a couple of things. One is entrepreneurs, once upon a time I thought I'd maybe want to be a writer. And at one point somebody said, Bing, you don't get it. What distinguishes writers is they write. They write every day. They don't have this fantasy writing, they write. And that's the thing about entrepreneurs. I just tell people they're wondering they should entrepreneurs say, well, it's useful to have a good idea, but also be prepared to do it 3 or 4 times. And then what I've found with people when they start being family age, you just can't afford, they can't afford to live on stock options for more than about 4 years. So a couple things happen. One, if the company starts not to work, those people with families tend to then go take a safe salary job for 2 to 4 years and reload emotionally and financially. A lot of them come back to entrepreneurship because it's kind of fun. I've also talked to people who are operators about going into investing, or going into advising, and I tell them operating skills are rarer than cognitive skills. So if you're an operator who can lead people, build their confidence, and help them prioritize, when in doubt, keep doing that because it's rarer. Investing is interesting because you can connect the dots and cross-pollinate from one idea to another, one person to another. So you're in kind of you're building your own knowledge graph across people and even industries. But it's not nearly as team-oriented. So I'd say if you're deciding between an established career and entrepreneurial, the problem with risk is we're pretty bad at judging the odds in real life. It's a lot easier in Vegas. And so, you know, if you do something that you think is 1,000-to-1 return, and, you know, with a 10% chance of success, you know, the expected value there is higher than 100% chance of a 1. But you don't know until way too late if it was 1,000-to-1 opportunity with a 10% chance, or it was a 2-to-1 opportunity with a 1% chance. And so my sense is the way people do it is they alternate. And back to Peter G.W. Keene, take big risk first, because you can take a big risk no matter how bad it is. You can go back and harken back to what you did before the big risk. But if you do something safe and then you take a risk, and then you're kind of left without any career foundation.
And
Okay.
Speaking of that, I know you've got you've done a deck on kind of career advice in different.
Yeah, I did it for kids. I have a deck called How to Pick Your First Job. I've done it to Yale students and the entrepreneurial society and stuff like that. And you know, I tend to go out of my way to try to help high potential motivated young people, which for me has always been people under 30. Maybe by now it's people under 50, but I still kind of think like 15 to 30 is just an exciting time of life to try to help. You want to go to the next one, Michael's question about NFTs?
Yeah.
So it turns out I've learned along the way that there's a time of life that child development people think is kind of the collecting era. So if you remember, if you ever collected rocks or stones, or if you're grown up, maybe you collect golf course holes with a thing called a bucket list. But the child development psychologists would say collection is just a natural part of growing up that sticks with some people forever. You're kind of channeling your happy 8-year-old self. And so, you know, there's a lot of gamification with collection mechanic. There's the sense of, you know, got to catch them all. If you're a reader, I want to read all the books by Robert Parker. I want to see all the movies by Spielberg. It's kind of this completion thing. And we've used collection for a long time with badges. We create badges and then people get them. If you're a Boy Scout, I don't know what badges Girl Scouts have. Boy Scouts, you know, there's merit badges, and then there's Eagle Scout, you know, and you have I think 21 merit badges, and you know, people just like that as signals of achievement. So NFTs, the first one that I knew of was from Dapper Labs. It's called CryptoKitties, and it was residing on the blockchain. So these collectible assets, in this case, it was little emoji type kitties, couldn't be frauded. And there was speculation as if it was a new cryptocurrency. And some of these kitties that sold for like $5 at first went up into the thousands for no particular reason at all. I think there was once a tulip craze in Holland in like the 1700s, and sometimes these crazes happen. And because it was sitting on crypto, there was this sense from some of the people that it was interesting speculation. It had a little fun aspect to it. Because on crypto, it might follow the same value increase that Bitcoin and Ethereum did. So it's always interesting when you get speculative value. Any of you buy and trade stock know that there's always movement around the discounted cash flow value of a stock. That I think for Electronic Arts for 15 years, every time it started to go up, it overshot where it should be by $5 to $10, and it started to go down and it undershot. So NFTs right now are this non-piratable collectibles that maybe give people a sense that they're playing the cryptocurrency speculation game, but with something that's a little more fun. I'd say in general, these non-fungible tokens are share something in common with cryptocurrency, that their value can be distributed and isn't controlled by anybody. And so just as cryptocurrency price isn't controlled by any government, and no government can print more of them, the same with these NFTs. Once they get out in the wild, the company that created them no longer has any control over the value. Right now, it's getting a lot of coverage in about the last month because Dapper Labs is doing something now with NBA players, and that's kind of gone through the roof. It'd be like think of it as your baseball cards, and guess what? There's no intrinsic value in baseball cards. It's some like Honus Wagner rookie card or something like that, goes for $100,000. But then they created some of these tokens that are more like wizard pictures in Harry Potter, where they're animated, and those seem even rarer. So I kind of think, the question is content creators. I kind of think this is just a merger of crypto and collectibles, and it's pretty interesting. And my role with Dapper is to try to create intrinsic value of the assets in gameplay. Let's see, Rob was CEO, exec coach. So around Kleiner, so Dora introduced Bill Campbell to Google and Apple, and Bill Campbell, there's a book out of him called $1 Trillion Coach. He was a terrible football coach at Columbia, but a great Silicon Valley coach. He was a pretty good kind of mid-level CEO in the Valley, and then became a coach. And there are, I do executive coaching, but I do it, I do two things on product market fit and team scaling. And I've got more of a curriculum that Bill did. Bill only worked with a couple companies. I work with a lot. I've seen him at work. He would, as a coach, he would sit in exec meetings, not say a word, and only talk to the CEO outside. So he'd observe and then tune, a little like Jiminy Cricket on Pinocchio's shoulder. And there are exec coaches. I haven't seen an exec coach, kind of other than myself, make a difference in outcomes in CEOs. I think in general, the founders who turn out to be great CEOs are learning machines. Brian Chesky at Airbnb is one. And so you'd like to have a coach who just is like a fitness trainer, puts you on a regular schedule and reminds you what you said you were going to do. I've seen personal coaches make a difference, and kind of like psychotherapy with with deliverables. I don't know how good that question is. At Kleiner, there's no go-to exec coach. They don't even recommend them. Kleiner will sometimes recommend independent board members. But again, investors are not very bought into helping CEOs get better. You know, I think about Uber and, you know, with Travis Kalanick, who I knew a little bit, and I just think massive failure of a board. Now, any of you are in investing, you know, if a founder suddenly raises crap loads of money, more than you think they deserve, it's really hard to rein them in. But it is kind of the job of the board to keep the CEO, you know, keep the CEO effective, and to do that, the board needs to have some kind of moral authority relationship with the CEO. But there are definitely some board fails in technology.
I think people would be really interested when you started out and went up to see Amazon early on. I know you had some interesting experiences there.
I'll try to tell this story really quickly, but so I've been friends with John Doerr for a long time, and in fact, my wife was the lead headhunter for John Doerr and Vinod Khosla in the late 80s before we had kids, and then she made me support the family. But the first decade we were married, she paid for all of our vacations. And then every Sunday I'd work for a company unpaid. So I'd trade that for vacation. But so John Doerr and I are going for a bike ride. And I got invited by Kleiner into their side fund. And in exchange, I did diligence on their consumer products for a couple of years. And they invited me to give a talk on marketing and branding to one of their annual CEO conferences. It was a hit. And they asked me back the next year to just come be a spectator. So I did. We went to Aspen, my wife and I. And Charlie Rose interviewed a couple of people, including Jeff Bezos, who this was in summer of 2002. And I hadn't been following Amazon stock, but I was a customer. And so I paid attention. And then about a month later, Doerr asked me, how'd you like the conversation? I love not having to speak. I got to actually listen to them all. But I think Bezos is doing it wrong. And he goes, what should he do? I said, for the world's most customer obsessed company, he didn't tell a single anecdote about customers. I don't think he really knows his customers. And I've dealt with retailers all along. Retailers, in my experience at Walmart and Toys R Us, they believe they could walk on the store floor, look at somebody and tell you what they were going to buy. They've got that, you know, buyer ego. And he didn't even tell a charming story about a single customer. It just doesn't seem right. He said, what would you do? I said, oh, John. I said, I'd create a customer loyalty program, even though often they don't work. He goes, oh, well, what would you offer? And I go, John, I don't know, come on, you know, we're on a bike ride. He goes, no, really, what would you do? I go, okay, I'd give a shipping benefit, I'd give a monthly letter from the CEO, and I'd give a Christmas shopping concierge for hard to find items. He goes, okay, that's interesting. He said, what would you call it? I go, John, I go, Christ, no, really, what would you call it? I go, Amazon Black. I've always admired American. So like, nah, that's derivative. How about Amazon Prime? Nobody's ever used Prime in a brand name before. And he goes, oh, okay, that's interesting. He said, if I give you my plane for a day, would you fly up to Seattle and meet Jeff Bezos? And I go, nah, I won't take your plane. I got to go up for Electronic Arts. I'll just go up on my own. So I have a meeting with Bezos. We're having lunch for an hour at a restaurant downtown Seattle. And I hand him a piece of paper, and he said, "What's that?" I feel like kind of a dope. You're running a big company, and I'm flying up here with nothing. So I thought I'd write down 5 ideas for you. And he said, "Huh?" And unbeknownst to me at the time, Amazon has a writing culture. And he said, "Nobody's ever come to me in a business meeting and handed me something written down." I go, you know, thank goodness Yale. And so the first one was Amazon Prime. And so a week later, our 1 hour meeting turned out to be 3.5 hours or something like that. And a week later, I got a call from Norbert Gottenberg, the board recruiter, asking if I'd like to audition to go on the board.
Pretty cool. Yeah. And I think at one point you had some thoughts about how big the company was going to be. Is that right?
Oh yeah, because at Electronic Arts, I asked the salespeople, "How big is e-commerce going to be?" I think e-commerce could be bigger than it's never going to be. It's never going to be bigger than a couple of percent of commerce. You know, it's too much friction. People don't really like it. It's never big. I think it's going to be bigger than that. And so we're in one meeting with Amazon, and they're going through something, and I'm in about my first year there. And in my own mind, I'm going, okay, total U.S. commerce. Now, e-commerce, I think e-commerce is going to be 15% of commerce in the next 15 years. And I think Amazon could get 10% of it. That's always kind of a tipping point at EA. We always tried to get to 7% of markets served. And at one point, you know, I kind of interrupted. I just said, "You guys are thinking small, you know. I don't think you're ambitious enough. This company could be a 50 billion revenue company." And they looked at me, you know, really? And it's clear they hadn't thought about it. And, you know, instead they were focused on the micro parts of the Bezos flywheel, and they were just trying to improve the flywheel. But at the time, they were, for any of you who are in the stock market, between 99 and 02, Bezos turned over 12 of his 8 direct reports. And the stock went from like 105 to 5 in kind of a couple days in 99. And they were a cash burning machine. They were way out of control. So, and you know, I didn't know it at the time. So when I got on the board, I found out, you know, they were struggling to only lose a few $100 million a year. And, you know, they had this big machine, but it was pretty inefficient, and they scaled it too fast.
So I know you're a fan of, well, you probably know more or as much about augmented reality, virtual reality proposals around right now than anybody. Where do you see this whole, I know when I speak on the impact of AI down the road for our kids, our grandkids, I talk about the challenge of navigating between kind of what I call our physical world and the virtual worlds we'll have. Any thoughts on where we're going in terms of the virtual world area?
Yeah, so, you know, I think back to Shirley MacLaine, who kind of famously, you know, had these out-of-body experiences. I think that the notion of these digital parallel worlds is live multiple lives at once. And, you know, you can already, anyway, it's, you know, I grew up in the 50s where, you know, in theory, everybody lived the same life. And in the, you know, the digital world, there's the switching costs seem to get lower and lower. And I can see in role-playing games, especially teenagers, the job of teenagers is to explore identity. And so I kind of think you can just make your world better. So ultimately with AR, which are the glasses you can see through, and it will seemingly put objects into your actual world, like, you know, a dinosaur or a sword in that rock that you've stood on in the middle of your lake, if you want to play King Arthur. So make your world a better place. So the notion of AR is you put on the goggles and your world becomes better. VR, you put on goggles and all you see is this computer generated world. It feels scarily immersive, like you're actually on the edge of a cliff and you're actually about to get hit with something. So I think VR is ultimately the best home theater you can walk around in, and AR is kind of redecorate your world without the pain of moving couches around. And I think both are going to win. And the ultimate AR is going to be glasses that look like Oakley biking glasses that have face recognition and remind you the name and last contact when you see a person on a street. So you never have to fake that you know somebody ever again. And, you know, I work with the Pokemon Go company. But AR and VR right now, the hardware isn't good enough. VR has gotten past the sickness inducing, but it's not accurate enough. And so much of games, as in sports or as in golf, it's a millimeter in contact with a golf club makes it big. Can you make a 50-yard difference? And so if you can't get to that pixel accuracy, it doesn't quite work. And then, both technologies have presentation issues like TVs do, and you're kind of basically walking around with a 40-inch TV screen an inch from your eyes with a power pack on your waist. I think both are definitely going to work. Interestingly enough, in VR, the number one use of VR headsets in China is to give kids their own TV. So in any culture where there's small living units with only one TV, the parents get it. So the kids get VR goggles so they can watch TV.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the interesting thing about, so the Magic Leap that I know that raised tons of money and has Google and Alibaba in it, just changed CEOs. And there's huge curiosity about it because you can, as a group, see other people through clear lenses in theory, and then you can jointly design. Med schools are doing cadaver investigation in groups and doing it with computer graphics as opposed to kind of $4,000 robotic cadavers. Car designers are doing it. So there's this sense that walk around CAD/CAM or walk around learning simulation is going to work, but it's going pretty slowly.
And I think we've seen some interesting, graphic user interface. I think, was there a company, Meta, was it, where they had a kind of holographic that...
Meta was just I knew those guys. I even gave a talk to them about how to be a great AR company. They were a kind of a poor man's HoloLens. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty visionary presenter, founder who it was a good recruiter but not a good operator, so just killed with mistakes, and so that ended up turning into a zero. And the surprising thing that I've learned in video games is this notion of a killer app. You think about, hey, there's this new Xbox, it's got 100 games, or there's this iPhone, it's got 2,000 games. In general, until you have one app that justifies the cost of the hardware, you can't sell the hardware. So it's never volume, it's always a single thing. And so in AR and VR, there's not a single great app in either.
I know I imagine we've got people who are, thinking about pitching their next thing. I know you've talked and written a lot about what are the two slides that investors always look at, 100% of investors?
It is the title screen that you have on the screen when you're starting the meeting. It's kind of the preface, and then it's the income statement. And the difference between a seed investment and A is whether there's an income statement or not. Seed investors say, I'm cool, give me a little money. Series A, you got to actually, have an Excel spreadsheet with drivers and outcomes. And so I do tell founders that most founders waste half of their must-see screens. Most people put the name of the company with some kind of goofy picture on the back of it. It's the opening screen, and they put it up there, and they go, okay. Now I'm going to start. And as an investor, you look and go, wow. Well, they're already signaling that they're not time efficient. So I tell people the first slide ought to be your movie poster. It ought to sit up there and be something that people look at and go, I'm already interested.
Yeah, and movie poster is a great metaphor for that, I think.
And what's the movie poster ideally? Tell me the future when you have succeeded and changed people's lives. Show me an iPhone photo of people having a successful moment with your product in year N when you're gushing with cash. And start with that.
I love it. Before we depart here, we've only got fast.
Can I do I just feel guilty about other
yeah.
people putting questions. So
Yeah.
Daniel Beck, not pursuing a career at all. I think the answer there is pursuing passion matters. And you know, I kind of like making money as a fisherman. As a fisherman, I realize I like making money, but for me, you know, my daily goals are money, participate in world-class creative, and help high potential people get better. And you know, I kind of need the gyroscope of team and goals. And so, not pursuing a career means do stuff that doesn't make money. I kind of I don't like when high potential people retire. I did my retirement in my 20s. I got unemployment benefits in my 20s off season, and it drove me crazy. So I kind of admire people who get rich and keep working. Okay, Viviana, when losing number one is I sort of say later for hit the next milestone. Well, that's a good one. How do you manage short term plus long term? You know, ultimately the answer is to have a strategy that connects the two. And what I've found is many founders, when they get into the hullabaloo of running a company, they kind of forget what they started, why they started. So I take that movie poster showing your vision in the future, I'd put it on every wall in the company. And, you know, I'd salute it and look at it. And then I have something I call calendar carets or calendar kaizen, which is to log your calendar, and then about once a month look at every hour in the month and evaluate it for productivity and joy. And my joy average is about a 7.5 on a 10 scale. And that was when I was on an airplane once a week, and my airplane joy never gets above 6, and it's often down to 4. And knowing what your 10 joys are, and then productivity for a lot of you who have been around a while, you know, it's what feels productive in the moment often turns out not to be productive. And I joked to a recent college grad computer programmers, the days they think are most productive, they're usually writing buggy code and pissing people off. But I do, you know, trying to get a sense of what makes you productive. And if you're a boss or a subordinate, having the discussion with a subordinate supervisor about, here's how I'm most productive, here's what you can do for me, and even measure it. And you know, I think you want to operate at a high level of joy and productivity, but like Tour de France cyclist, there's times where you need to be able to attack, and they can put out like 600, 700 watts for a short period of time, but they can't do it for very long. Okay, Ben Kellogg, how did Bezos enforce the writing culture? Interestingly, you know, he did it by example, but I reverse engineered. Some of this happened before I got there. And, you know, the thing about institutional history, often people don't stop and talk about it. So with Bezos, at dinner with Bezos, he goes, okay, that's enough. Now let's get a single threaded conversation. He's like, I can't concentrate when there's multiple feeds going on at once. And PowerPoint pisses him off. He thinks PowerPoint, he doesn't believe that a picture's worth 1,000 words. And for him, it doesn't work. So I think as much as anything else, he tuned the use of writing to what works for him. In about 2016, I asked him, Jeff, are you I'm probably the only person who ever asked him, give me a formal definition for these leadership principles you have. And I asked him, Jeff, in what way are you a better CEO now than you used to be? And he goes, Nobody's ever asked me that question. You know, they ask him, what does it feel like to be rich and all that stuff, but not how's your craft improved? He said, I'm a better listener. And he said, it used to be, and interestingly enough, I heard the same thing from Steven Spielberg. And Spielberg said, I used to get a script and it'd always be 100 pages long. As soon as I got to a page I didn't like, I'd get pissed off and throw the script against the wall and stop reading it. He said, as I got more mature, I realized that creative moments can be anywhere in the 100 pages. And I had to look, because if there's one bait page, you can make a movie out of it. And so I had to be hunting for the great page. So I got more disciplined about that. And Bezos got the same. He stopped interrupting, and he started finding way, and even learned to be the most powerful person in the room. Always spoke last, so not to bias other people. And writing for him is a way to listen better. And so in fact, people in leadership levels at Amazon have to do a writing sample during the interview process. And some people hate it and they don't come to Amazon. But, you know, any of you who've ever created values for a company, you can remember what it's like growing up with your own parents, where they sometimes would talk the talk, but not walk the talk. And so for leaders to actually go out of the way to make personal sacrifice to exhibit the values that they espouse is kind of hard to do. So in Amazon, the way they institutionalize the leadership principles, I won't call them out, but you can look them up. One is like, you know, think big. Another is disagree but commit. Is every person interviewed at Amazon gets interviewed by one person from HR and 6 other people. And each of those 6 people's job is to interview on 2 of the 12 leadership principles. And that's all they have to do in the kind of 30 to 60 minutes. And so, you know, it's like how often you interview people. Well, when you're being interviewed, you get asked these questions, oh, I don't know if they care about it or not. But then over the years, you find every time you interview somebody, you're doing 2 of the leadership principles. And so you realize the company takes it seriously. And that's the whole interview process. And then at the end of the interview, you get those 7 people together. HR is kind of the chair and the 6 people, and you say, are you inclined to hire or not inclined to hire? Give me your diligence on the 2 principles. And then the hiring manager gets to decide. And they can recommend and do a hire even if all 6 people say no. It rarely happens, but it often happens that 2 people are not inclined and they'll still hire, which on the way is not the way Yale admissions happen. Yale admissions, of the 5 people, if it's unanimous, they get in. If there's 1 no, they can be deferred. 2 no's, they're gone forever.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just trying to jam through other stuff. The press release. So I actually think the idea of working backwards document. Amazon landed on a press release. At EA, we did package mocks. At Zynga, we do app store mocks. So you try to physicalize as if you're at the moment of launch. And we can also do, I think reviews are really useful to do. The nice thing, and the problem with press releases, they don't have no meaning in real life. So it's kind of essay you write for school that nobody cares about. But that's what they landed on. But it's called a working backwards document, which happens to be a press release, and but they'll put up other kinds of stuff. The toy business their working backwards document was a TV commercial at Toy Fair. Okay, some question about Oculus and mass adoption. Now, mass adoption is, I think it's 10 million monthly users is the base. We used to say at Zynga is we want to get 10 million installs in 90 days. And a killer app for a new product usually only penetrates 35% of the market. So to get 10 million installs, you need to have 10 divided by 0.35 as a monthly, not a total install base, but monthly active users. So no, it's not there yet. It's still kind of an oddity. The good news is that teenagers who get them now use them more than once, where a year ago they mostly didn't. Jefferson asked, big ideas versus pedestrian ideas. Oh, how does Bezos? The think big, at Amazon talk, think big is something in 10 years you could do $1 billion in free cash flow. And that hasn't changed even as the company's gotten more and more valuable. That's kind of what seems like scale. It's interesting when I rubbed up against Apple and when I was trying to convince Apple to get into gaming, they said if it couldn't reach 1 billion customers, they didn't care. I went into it, I said, games, there's 200 million game consoles out there and there's 200 million players. I go, doesn't start with a B, we don't care. I thought they were arrogant, and then later on I saw they were right. VR, you can do the whole, you can use a phone as a way to authenticate and to put in your credit card somewhere for buying stuff. AR magically doesn't need a phone. The Israeli company Augmind, haven't heard of them. Really good AR for mobile. Thank you, Jeffrey. Hey, my email is bgordon@kleinerperkins.com, and I answer quickly and often. BGORDON Kleiner Perkins, KLEINERPERKINS.com.
Well, Ben,
okay, really quickly, Nehemiah, how do you go about seeing the future?
good one.
I project, but there's some things a little like, if you're a parent, that all teenagers kind of share something in common, if only hormones, and companies share something in common at various stages. And, a company that raises a Series A, here's your future. In 18 months, you're going to have to raise money at a 2 to 4x valuation, and you're going to have to start like 4 months before. So that's that's no great fortune telling. It's just reminding them of something they might not be thinking about at the time. Kate. Ooh, buy a company, credit writing channel. So let's see. So Kate, she asked, how to writing culture? I would not call it a writing culture. I'd call it a storytelling culture. And one of the questions Sam had for me before is, and I tell founders, a great pitch doubles valuation from the numbers. And that's kind of charisma, because a great pitch, it's it makes it easy to see how to bring other investors, other employees, and ultimately customers along. So I would focus on storytelling. And writing it's scary for most people, for many people. But if they could tell a story, it could get written down. And storytelling is a way to create meaning, and also to create this sense of logical connection, and a way to give something, the future, a sense of manifest destiny. But Kate, if you want to follow up that more, email me. Stephen Ho. So Stephen Ho asked about employee performance. So I've actually studied this. Do you know what NPS, Net Promoter Score, is? It's basically a measure of all the positives minus the negatives, with neutrals as a null. And the high NPS is like a 60. That'd be 80% say this is awesome, I'd recommend it to my friend and tell them they're stupid or they didn't do it. And 20% said, nah, it's not that good. And that's a 60. So annual reviews have an NPS of -10 to -20. Most people don't like getting. But if you ever played a sport, for example, you love the coach that can make you better. Hey Jeff, when you're at the top of the key there, if you would have been 2 feet closer to the basket when that guy made that move, you would have owned him. It's like, oh, I wasn't thinking about it. Yeah. So when you're out there, just think 2 feet, 2 feet, 2 feet, and you go thanks, that's gold. And then it works and it's really gold. So annual reviews should be like that. And instead, annual reviews just feel like going behind the principal's office or going behind the woodshed and getting beat up. So Amazon, so here's an interesting math exercise for you. At Amazon, 77% of summer interns get full-time job hires. Good number. At EA, it was 90%. But so what that means from Amazon is 23% of the hires were faulty. 23%. Now, if you go, well, we don't have any other measure, but that's summer interns. What if our full-time employees are also 23% faulty? What does that mean? Well, Amazon's growing its employee base, of its salaried employee base, 30% a year. So 23% times 30%, 6.9. That says it's very likely that 6.9% of your employees at any point in time are faulty hires. So what do? You tell the leaders, we're gonna fire, or we're gonna attrite 6.9% of our employees every year, because we can't get better at hiring, so we just got a top grade. And that gets, people hate thinking there's top grading, especially if they went to a selective university where today's F is actually a B+. But, you know, it happens in nature as well. John T, be contrarian. You know what I found, the best thing I'd say about that is, what I've discovered, if you're in a room and people are laughing at a business idea, you have to slap yourself and go, wait, that just means it's one end of the bell curve, but it doesn't tell you which end of the bell curve it is. And so in the Kleiner room, when Snapchat got presented, people laughed because the first picture they saw was off color. Everybody laughs, said, no way we're going to invest in that. I think Airbnb was the same way. So the answer is you have to go monster hunting, and nobody has a, there's no science to it. Okay, Marianne Hamilton. So this basically asks a question about work-life balance. And I tell people, you know, there is no work-life balance. And there's just work-life compromise. And in my experience, the hardest work-life compromise is working single mothers. I have empathy, but it's just about impossible. But, you know, for someone like me, there's family, love, fitness, work, fitness, sports, and work. And there's really enough time for two. And so, you know, it's you do realize I'm a Lance Armstrong fan, even with all his falderall. He wrote a book called Every Second Counts. And I think you realize at some point in time where you thought money was what mattered, you realized time is what mattered. So, you know, that's why measuring your time by the hour to create a historical artifact for investigation is pretty valuable. And then it's really helpful if you share. You know, you can combine stuff. Like, I'm never happier than when I'm making a game that my family wants to play. Never happier than when I'm doing fitness. Like today, I skipped 2 hours of business meetings for a last day ski with my daughter, my 29-year-old Yale daughter has been living with us, our 31-year-old Yale daughter living with us during some quarantine. So it turns out we all love skiing. So you can multitask. My wife was really good at this early on. She just said, be home for dinner. So what I've discovered, that people I know became billionaires. Here's how they change their life. They lose weight. They get more now they think, shit, I better try to live forever. So they get more disciplined on that, usually by hiring people. And they start managing their time better. And, you know, Vinod Khosla, who's a personal buddy, he actually, when his older daughter turned age 12, he put an aquarium on his desk at work with a marble. And there was a marble in the aquarium for every weekend between then and when his daughter was going to go to college. And every Monday he took one out. And he just asked himself, was that worth it? And John Doerr early on set a goal and had his assistant measure of 70% of weeknights home for family dinner. So I think it, you know, it's that kind of discipline. Once you know that that time is of the essence. And then Marianne, like even with me, I learned early on that working people get 5 weeks off a year and school kids get 17 weeks off a year. And so there's 12 weeks where I can't be on vacation and they are. So what do? I started working remotely. Even before there's internet, I'd carry a briefcase with a week's worth of games and emails and documents, and I'd, you know, put in 40. I'd ski with them in the morning and put in 40 hours. So, you know, you kind of make do.
I think we've exhausted them. Bing, you've been great. Really appreciate.
Michael, nice to see you. There's probably other people out there that I know. So if I didn't, I've only seen kind of one of a series of pictures, but you know, thanks for the shout out from people I've run into in the past. Garth, you're doing pretty good work. Hope you're getting enough rest. How are you doing the work-life balance?
It's not easy, taking a lot of trains back and forth from DC to New Haven, but still loving it.
I'd say, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I've found during quarantine time, I can have more meetings per day. And so what I end up doing is meeting with the CEOs weekly instead of monthly. So it feels more like an operating cadence. And there's just no in between time, but it means kind of every hour on the hour I have a new meeting. So I'm kind of jamming through that stuff.
You see work from home continuing into the future.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I think it's for intellectual capital workers. I think we're going to get the norm of 3 days a week in the office is core. And you know, for anybody who's in real estate, that's, you know, that's pretty threatening because it kind of means that you know 40% of capacity is not utilized. There's probably a little more premium on meeting rooms and kind of quality rooms. By the way, it's the same problem for Yale that you know, universities are single player games, you know, with study carrels, and you get out and the Yale training is Yale is the best I've seen at selective colleges for team building, because they grow up in the residential colleges with kind of interdisciplinary, and a lot of the kids that go there want to be real liberal arts students. And but you get out, and if basically you're going to be a leader with some cognitive skills, you've had very little leadership experience even at Yale. You know, maybe a sports team, maybe an activity, but there's just no rooms where you can get 20 people together. And you know, so the lecture halls, you know, I think Yale probably ought to nuke 2/3 of its lecture halls. And you know, it's kind of like what's going on with Schwartzman. It's, you know, more small group spaces, or basically in the cross campus, the learning lab, kind of the underground area, there's just a little more space. And you know, Yale ought to be focused on intellectual curiosity, but effective teams. And at least now at Yale, the athletic department is now has effective teams. When I was there, other than Carm Koza, has pretty ineffective teams. Yale used to specialize in bad coaches with no KPIs. Rob, nice about the School of Management. The School of Management has been a great story, you know, from weird experiment to, you know, kind of like that school next to Smith. There was that weird experiment where nobody showered. That was kind of the Yale School of Management. Now now it's turned out to be this interdisciplinary cross geography. Hampshire College, thanks, Ron. Yeah, it's school of management now seems pretty leading edge. Still doesn't have quite the reputation it should, but I think the kids are coming out of there with a different kind of education. Well, I'm a born again Yaley. I would not. Oh, John Mitchell said he showered every day. Okay, touche. Yeah, I learned from marketing that it's really valuable to simplify. If something's at kind of 58%, you just turn it into a 1 because you can operate against it. But anyway, it's I'm kind of astonished at how many cool Yale people there are out there, and you know, you guys all age well. So I also have something I call the rule of 1.5, which is no matter how long a session goes, most humans can only take away 1.5 ideas. And an idea taken away is an idea written down or calendared. And I'd like to say this at the beginning of a lecture or seminar, and the people who take away more than 1.5 ideas either take great notes they can refer to, or they have a friend who takes great notes. And so then my challenge to everybody is, you know, it's your time. Make sure you get your 1.5 ideas taken away. And if you're too shy and didn't get around to it, and you're shy your 1.5 idea, but you wish you could get something, feel free to email me.
Well, Ben, you've been incredibly generous. Thanks for your time. We should probably curtail this. I know Randy, co-producer here, who overlapped with you at Yale, and I know is a real proponent of, when he was president of Muhlenberg, you know, you're in that meeting, speak last. When you're the one in authority, speak last, you'll hear more. But Randy, I know you want to promote some upcoming shows, which now's your chance.
All right, let me just tell you all that we've got some pretty interesting guests coming up. April 1st is our next show. That is going to feature 2 Yale writers. The first one is Catherine Hill, who's an established author with great reviews of her books in the Times. And the other is a younger alum named Beatrice Baresi, and she is just about to publish her first book. So if you think you have a book in you and you want to know what it's like to get into that line of endeavor, you'll want to tune in on April 1st. We have 2 shows in April, actually. The 29th, we have 2 different types of coaches. So one is a life coach, and the other is more of a fitness coach. So we'll be talking about coaching. And then at the end of May 27th, we're going to have 2 guests who are classmates of mine from class of 70. We're going to talk about very different approaches to retirement. One of those is Scott Simpson, who is an architect who can't seem to stop designing buildings and making an architect out of himself. And the other is a physician named Kim Peterson, who has completely stopped practicing medicine and is running his own little sustainable farm here in Maine. So those will be very interesting conversations about, you know, when you think, do I really want to retire? Is it going to be a good thing? Is it going to be a terrible thing? Will I keel over dead after 3 weeks? Will I get bored? You'll want to tune in for that. And Bing, I want to thank you for being our guest tonight. It was a fascinating conversation. And Sam, you, as always, did a superb job of making sure that we got a lot of useful information from our guests. So thanks. Career Pivots will be back April 1st. No
Great.
fool.
Thanks again, Bing. Thanks everybody for participating, and have a great week. Take care of the people around you. We are all under a lot of different stresses these days. So, but hopefully there's light at the end of the tunnel.